I am the voice of the Black Belt. I speak of its land, its architecture, its richness.
The Black Belt of Alabama is a magic place. It just feels different here. The land draws you in. You can come here, then go away, but the place leaves its mark upon you. It brings you back. Carl Kalmer was a professor from Harvard who came to the Black Belt in the 1930s. He said, "The Black Belt became, in my mind, a country apart, perhaps under an especial enchantment, exerting a softly insistent influence on all who ever trod its dark soil." A writer once said, "From De Soto's meeting with the Indian chief Tuscaloosa to the birth of the Confederacy to the civil rights struggles of the mid-20th century, some of the nation's most significant historical events began here in the Black Belt of Alabama." The Black Belt is named for its rich, dark soil. It lies in the central and southwestern part of the state of Alabama. The first people to settle here were the Native Americans. At Moundville, occupied from around AD 1000 until AD 1450, is a large settlement of Mississippian culture on the Black Warrior River. There were 5 major tribes that evolved from the Mississippian people, called the 5 civilized tribes. They included the Creeks, Cherokees, Chickasaws, Seminoles, and the Choctaws. Their culture has been called the richest Indian culture north of Mexico. Remnants of this culture can still be seen at Moundville Historical Park. Today it is a World Heritage Site. It was a large cultural headquarters of Indian culture for centuries. One important feature of the region that is still vital today is its river systems. These rivers were the main mode of transportation until the advent of railroads and the interstate highway system. The Tombigbee is the oldest river with its wide channels. It is part of the Tennessee-Tombigbee waterway that provides transportation and recreation for the nation. The Alabama is the other major river that runs through it. It has the distinction of being the centerpiece of Alabama Scenic River Trail that has drawn international attention as a national river trail. The Cahaba River is the only naturally flowing river left in the area. There are no dams to impede recreational progress on the Cahaba. This is a pristine river known for its surrounding prairie landscape and unique plants found nowhere else. The Cahaba is the most biologically diverse river of its size in the U.S. The prairie landscape was once a large part of the Black Belt, along with the canebrake. Now only 1% remains. We're working to restore this grassland prairie in places like Old Cahaba Archaeological Park and the Black Belt Gardens at the University of West Alabama. Early botanist William Bartram wrote of the vast canebrakes of the Black Belt. These canebrakes were the backbone of the Native American culture. They used the cane in almost every aspect of their lives, from the arrows and fish traps they hunted with to framing the walls of their dwelling. Alabama fever was a land rush that started after 1813, when the Indians were defeated in major battles that opened up the land for settlement. It was one of the major land booms in American history, unrivaled until the California Gold Rush. Among the earliest settlers were the French, deposed members of Napoleon's court who founded the vine and olive colony near Demopolis to grow olives and grapes. Other early settlers came together in forts until the conflict was subdued. The Black Belt was a prime place to settle because of the rich soil, which made some of its landowners some of the wealthiest people in the nation. These slaves were brought upriver from the port of Mobile, or overland, with their masters who came in with Alabama fever. A small percentage of the settlers were wealthy enough to own slaves. The Civil War has been called a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. The antebellum period prior to the war was when the Black Belt developed some of its finest architecture, preserved in homes and churches throughout the region. There are whole towns like Furman in Wilcox County and Gainesville in Sumter County that are on the National Historic Register. There are places preserved like Marion that are significant both in the antebellum period and the civil rights struggle. Cotton was king of the South, and the Black Belt was its crown jewel. This led to the seceding from the Union over the slavery issue, with the first capital of the Confederacy in Montgomery in the center of the Black Belt. With the end of the Civil War and the tumble of King Cotton from its throne, the Black Belt began its 100-year decline into the richest soil and the poorest people in the nation. Reconstruction was not the hoped-for answer to racial equality. In spite of the efforts of the Freedmen's Bureau and the federal government, another form of servitude evolved for both blacks and poor whites through the system of sharecropping. There was a rural economy which still placed all its hopes in the land, which created a worse environment for most of its people. The only bright spot was education. Both blacks and whites realized the importance of education as the only way out of the problems created by the agrarian economy. The first educational opportunities for blacks began in earnest in the Black Belt. Booker T. Washington founded Tuskegee Institute. William James Edwards founded Snow Hill Institute. Lincoln Normal School, which became Alabama State University, was founded in Marion. The majority of Rosenwald schools, funded by Julius Rosenwald, president of Sears Roebuck, were located in the Black Belt. For white students, there were other schools founded in the Black Belt. Howard College and Judson College for women were founded in Marion. Alabama Normal School was a women's teachers' college founded in Livingston, and Julia Tutwiler was its first president. It grew to be the coeducational University of West Alabama. The separate but equal educational philosophy continued until the civil rights movement that changed the Black Belt forever. Edna Lewis once said, "There's something about the South that stimulates creativity in its people, be they black or white, writers, artists, cooks, builders, or primitives, that pass away without knowing that they are talented." Nowhere is that more true than in the Black Belt, which has become known as the epicenter of Southern folk art. Some of the area's best work can be seen at Camden's Black Belt Treasures, which represents over 350 local artists, craftsmen, and writers. Some of the people in the Black Belt went on to become world famous, like Harper Lee, who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, read by school children everywhere. This story is recreated annually in Monroeville, Lee's hometown. Truman Capote spent his childhood growing up in Monroeville and based many of his stories there. The G's Bend quilters, who took what they had and made quilts that turned out to be great art, are in the Smithsonian Institute and have appeared on U.S. postage stamps. They tell their stories of hardship and overcoming, sing songs of their past, and teach a new generation to quilt. Ruby Pickens Tart collected slave songs and stories used by scholars everywhere in the Library of Congress. Her work is housed at the University of West Alabama, where there is a center for the study of the Black Belt that collects and catalogs all things Black Belt. There's a weekly radio and television program, the Sukanachi Review, featuring music of the Black Belt. The Black Belt is a place of hospitality. Being such a poor part of the nation fostered creativity in the culinary arts. Soul food was invented by poor people who wanted to feed their families and have enough for guests as well. These culinary traditions are celebrated every year. The storytelling tradition of the Black Belt is one of its strongest creative features. This tradition was enhanced by the stories of Alabama storyteller Catherine Tucker Wyndham. She collected, preserved, and reminisced about the Black Belt in a variety of stories, from ghost stories to family tales, bringing an appreciation of the spoken word to listeners all across the country. Another outgrowth of her collecting folklore is Alabama Ghost Trail, featured in USA Today and in segments on YouTube. People took a kind of creativity, using what they knew or found at hand, and created a lasting contribution to the arts. Today, Tin Man Charlie Lucas takes found objects and house paint to create sculptures and murals. This artistic tradition did not just start with this generation. Claire Weaver Parrish was a Selma artist who created for Tiffany's. Geneva Mercer was a Marengo County artist who achieved international fame in the 20th century. There are traditions passed down in families like basket making, blacksmithing, and furniture making that still flourish. Perhaps the hardest and most glorious part of the story of the Black Belt is its role in the civil and voting rights movements. The 60s in Alabama were ushered in with the infamous words of Governor George Wallace. Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. All this began to change immediately as the black population realized that things were long overdue for change. Two of the major catalysts for this change happened in the Black Belt. The first was the refusal of social activist Rosa Parks to honor the blacks to the back of the bus edict. When a white man demanded her seat, she refused to move. She was jailed, which led to the Montgomery bus boycott. The second event was the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson in Marion, who was shot trying to protect his grandmother. When he died, the people said, "Let us take his body and lay it on the Capitol steps at the feet of George Wallace." This was the catalyst for the Selma to Montgomery March that became famous around the world as a cry for freedom and equality. The march began on what has become to be known as Bloody Sunday because of the incidents at the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. Only 300 were allowed to pass and begin the march to Montgomery. The publicity swelled the numbers of protesters to 25,000 at the end of the march. Martin Luther King stirred the crowd with his oratory that day and became the acknowledged leader of the movement in the Black Belt and later the nation. This day caused the National Voting Rights Act of 1965 to be signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson. Throughout the Black Belt, churches, which had always been the seats of power in the black community, became the place where people met and strategies for racial equality were planned. Black people began to form long lines at the courthouses in the Black Belt to sign up to vote. This caused a disruption in the status quo of Jim Crow, the tradition of white supremacy that had existed since Reconstruction. Many blacks were beaten, threatened, fired from their jobs, and otherwise intimidated to deter them from registering to vote. They bravely forged ahead and established themselves as partners in the building of the New South. They were admitted to formerly all-white schools and given a chance at a better education. They were elected to public office, gaining a majority of voters in many rural Black Belt counties. They now had a say in the policies being formed. The world changed for all people in the Black Belt. All were given an equal opportunity to build the new future. It didn't change totally overnight, but today the children, both black and white, find it hard to believe what transpired in the 1960s. They cannot fathom a world where blacks were not allowed to eat where they chose or sit where they chose in theaters and other public places. They cannot imagine a world that did not allow black people equal access. Progress has been made toward the equality of all people in the Black Belt. However, there are many who say that blacks should never forget the struggle. This is the conundrum faced by the Black Belt today. What is the answer? The people of the Black Belt continue to work together to look for answers. They focus on the strengths of their culture and the land which they all love. They celebrate their differences and their unity of purpose in living peacefully in a beautiful, and as Carl Kalmer put it, the especial enchanted land. This is the Black Belt.